Three men arrive at the pearly gates. Go with me. And St. Peter says, well, you can get in if you can answer one question. And they say, you got it. We got this. Okay. And St. Peter turns to the first man and he says, what is Easter? And the first man says, oh, that's easy. It comes in November. We sit around a table, we eat a lot, and we give thanks. St. Peter's is like, nope, out. Goes to the next guy. What is Easter? That gentleman says, oh, well, Easter, of course. Easter happens in December. We bring a tree into the house, we decorate with lights, we celebrate the birth of Jesus, we exchange presents, and no, Peter's pretty disgusted by this time. He goes to the third guy. He says, what is Easter? For the love, tell me. And the third gentleman says, I got this, Pete. Easter, it's a Christian holiday. It coincides with the Jewish tradition of Passover. It commemorates the time when Jesus had his Last Supper with his disciples, and one of those disciples deceived him, and he was arrested and turned over to the Romans, and he was crucified, and he died, and he was buried in a tomb, and it was sealed off by a large boulder. And once a year, the boulder is moved, and Jesus comes out, and if he sees his shadow, there's 6 more weeks of winter. Oh, all kidding aside, the question from that joke, what is Easter, is actually tricky to answer. It's a powerful one for us because how you answer this question depends completely on the lens through which you see the world, and in particular, how you view the God of your understanding. So, before I answer my version of St. Peter's question, I first need to explain the lens that we here at New Thought Center for Spiritual Living look through, because I recognize that this is one of those Sundays, there's only maybe 2 a year, when we often get new folks. You want to check us out. Maybe you've heard a little bit about us, but you weren't sure, or a friend brought you / begged you to come with you. Maybe you know you're going to have a great brunch waiting after this. I'm teasing. But the idea here is that for those of you who are here for the first time, you may be wondering what we are all about. Those of you who are joining us online, you might be curious how we celebrate Easter here, which I promise I will get to in a moment. You may be scratching your head a little bit, looking at our banner behind us here that honors all the world's religions. So I'm going to give you in a nutshell the scoop, the spiel. I do this only once a year. So here goes. Are you ready? All right. Our faith path is called New Thought. Some refer to it as universal spirituality. New Thought is rooted in the ancient mystical or original aspects of all the great faith traditions of the world without dogma or religiosity. You will find no guilt, fire, or damnation in these walls, my friends. No. New Thought is a metaphysical, spiritual teaching. The word metaphysical means, it's simple, it just means to see beyond, and that is what we strive to do here. So for example, we do not take the Hebrew or Christian Bibles or any sacred texts literally. We understand them as they were originally meant to be. Metaphors for how to live this life of ours with compassion and care. We understand that these stories are just that. They are stories, and they are filled with timeless ancient wisdom that we can learn from. We do not believe that there is only one way to experience God or the divine. No one religion owns God. On any given Sunday, if you are here, you will hear wisdom from the teachings of the ancient Vedas, from the Buddha, from Jesus of Nazareth, Lao Tzu, and so many of the great spiritual teachings such as the Kabbalah, the Sikh faith, the ancient Celts, the Quakers, and sometimes what I have learned that week from my little dog Malachi. We do not subscribe to a moody male deity God out there in the sky, but rather to a loving, ineffable presence that is at the center of each one of us and is everywhere in and through all things, including the mysteries that we do not yet understand. We lean into the great questions with curiosity. Our New Thought teaching is a very practical one. We provide, as we said earlier, spiritual tools for personal and global transformation. And so you know, we have a lot of words for God around here. God, spirit, source, quantum consciousness, the I am, the ultimate reality, the energy. Whatever works for you, you get to choose that word. The word that I use is love. For me, God is love. We celebrate the intersection between science and spirituality. We revere science and understand that the quantum field that we live in is made up of energy, that every single thing, everything is energy. And we are all part of this divine body of energy, this energetic universe. And within this divine universe that we all live in, we have the opportunity to recognize the sacred and the holy that is everywhere. In the small and ordinary, and also in the big stuff, too. We understand that even if we don't like it, we are all connected. We are all of us, every one of us, connected to each other through this divine energy that we all share. And if we could whittle our teaching down to one word, it would be oneness. But here is the key. Oneness is never sameness. The diversity of this one human family that we all belong to, with all of its glorious colors and hues and genders and sizes and expressions and differences, are what actually make up the totality of this divine one. Without this divine diversity of ours, without this, we would not be one. The bottom line is that we all belong to each other, and therefore we must do all that we can to care for each other and our planet. And this, my friends, is my yearly Easter summation of who we are. So, with that, back to Peter's question. What is Easter? So in the Christian tradition, Easter is considered a seminal event. It celebrates the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, and it serves as the basis for the belief in eternal life. Now, for us here in New Thought, we also absolutely believe that life and our individual soul is eternal. I like to think of death as a rite of passage to the other side of life. And this process is an ongoing evolution and continuation of our soul and our soul's journey. You know, Easter is a time when we often remember loved ones who have made their transition or who have passed on. Some of you I know brought lilies here. Some of you online ordered them so that we could have them here in remembrance of a loved one. Lilies in the Hebrew and Christian Bibles represent rebirth and hope. And like many of you who brought your lilies, I brought two. Livy and I brought two in memory of my father-in-law, Khalil, Liv's grandpa, who passed in 2021, just 2 weeks before he could get the vaccine. And the second lily is for my mother-in-law, Alice, Livy's grandma, who passed just a year later in June of last year, actually also with complications from COVID. And so while this day is a day of celebration and triumph, and I will get to the metaphysical meaning of Easter in a moment, it can also be a day that has a bittersweetness to it. I want to honor that. For those of you who are grieving or remembering a loved one today, or perhaps you may be feeling loss over maybe something that was, but something that has changed and is not the same, I want you to know that I am with you. Aramaic is the language that Jesus spoke. And in Aramaic, the word death is not translated in the same way we know it in English. Rather, in Aramaic, the word death is more closely related to the idea of existing elsewhere. Isn't that beautiful? And so if you are remembering a loved one today who is no longer physically with you, I invite you to lean into the comfort that their soul is eternal and that they are now existing on the other side of life. Maybe even having an Easter egg hunt in the sunshine, because maybe it's raining there. I mean, sunny there and not raining. Author and hospice counselor Kate McGann wrote, "The very first Easter taught us this, that life never ends and love never dies." Life never ends and love never dies. Yeah, amen. So, how do we enter the Easter story 20 centuries later and find something for ourselves? I believe we start with the concept of resurrection. Now, I understand that the whole resurrection idea can be tricky for some, and I'm going to address that. But really, the question is not whether you believe in the resurrection, rather, if you have known it, or moreover, if you are living it. So the original meaning of the word resurrection meant to rise above something, to rise up. The East Indian Jesuit Pratap Naik wrote, "Each time we love again after having our love rejected, we share in the power of the resurrection. Each time we hope again after having our hope smashed to pieces, we share in the power of the resurrection. Each time we pick up the pieces, wipe our tears, face the sun, and start again, we share in the power of the resurrection." Isn't that something? Yeah. The resurrection is for all of us. The resurrection narrative, this idea of rising above challenge or difficulty, is a metaphor for all of us. Each one of us has triumphed over something in our lives. If you are breathing, you have triumphed over something in your life. It is part of the human experience. And the metaphysical interpretation of the resurrection is the journey, that very same journey that every one of us has made, from darkness to light, from fear to faith, from bondage to freedom. It represents the rebirth of nature, from the dark, dull, and cold of winter to the warm light and colors of spring. It is the resurrection of our own hopes and dreams. It is the promise of the rebirth of a kind and deeply compassionate America. So, there's this old Zen proverb that I like to revisit this time of year. There was a king, and his people had become very entitled, and all of the wealthiest were taking from all of the poorest. And there was a major imbalance and inequity in his kingdom. And so he decided to do something about it. And at the entrance of his kingdom, he rolled a huge, gigantic boulder, blocking the gates to his kingdom. And he decided to hide in the bushes and see what would happen. And he watched for days as the wealthiest merchants would approach the entrance to the kingdom, and they couldn't get past it, and they would just grumble and complain, and they would walk all the way around it, not even lifting a finger to try to move it to help anyone else get through. They just complained and complained. They complained loudly about the king not fixing it for them. They said that they might pay someone to do it, but didn't. The king watched this in dismay and disappointment, and finally, one day, a young peasant boy, was carrying 2 heavy sacks of vegetables. And he approached the entrance to the kingdom. He was going to sell his vegetables, and he couldn't get by, and he put down his vegetables, and he tried his might to push. He was the first one. He tried to push that boulder out of the way. He tried and he tried, but he couldn't. And so he disappeared into the bushes, and he came back with a gigantic stick that he had to drag with all of his might, and he was able to just wedge it right under the boulder. And with all the strength that he had, he was able to move that boulder and roll it out of the way. He dusted himself off. He went down to grab his vegetables, and he saw in the pit where the boulder had been a tiny little purse. And he opened up the purse, and there was a note from the king saying, "This gold is for whomever moves that boulder for all the other people in the kingdom." And his life was changed. You know, that boulder is a metaphor for all of us. One of my favorite moments in the Easter story is when the women arrive at the tomb to prepare the body of Jesus for burial, and they discover that the boulder has been moved away. It's this totally dramatic moment in the story. It's really, really pivotal because we realize that it takes the moving of the boulder for Jesus of Nazareth to become Jesus the Christ. Christ, by the way, means the anointed one. It is not his last name. So, in the story, Jesus, the man, becomes the Christ when the boulder that was blocking his ascension is moved. A powerful question to ask yourself on this Easter day is, where are there boulders in my own life? Where am I feeling blocked? Where can I choose another idea or a thought about something that is difficult for me right now? And listen, I get it. I totally get it. You might actually have a very big boulder to move. And if that is the case, I invite you to lean into the spiritual truth that providence itself, love itself, the strength of the divine itself lives and breathes at the center of your being. You have strength, loves, that you do not yet know. And if you have something big that you are navigating, I invite you to lean into that loving strength, and also the loving strength of others who are willing to support you. Here at our spiritual center, we have practitioners who are trained. It takes 5 years for them in training, sometimes longer, to be able to sit with you and listen, to know the truth of you, to pray with you. I'm also a big fan of therapy, big fan. And I advocate tea time or tea time with a trusted friend. It's great, you know? And if your boulder is something like a difficult health diagnosis or an economic situation or crisis, or if you are watching from a state where legislation or laws are impacting your sense of identity, bodily autonomy, or freedom of expression, perhaps for you, the boulder that you may be experiencing needs to be moved to simply create the room for the opening of hope. For the opening of hope. Because sometimes when things are big and when things impact us, often the most powerful thing we can do is activate the power and the promise of hope. And I understand that sometimes hope can feel vulnerable. Just remember that to be vulnerable is to be courageous. There is so much power in hope. Easter itself is the symbol of audacious hope. And hope is love in action. Hope is actually active. Hope is not passive. Speaking of action, Jesus, the man, was an activist. Think about it. Jesus spent his last night on earth sharing food and teaching his disciples to wash the feet of others. He could have done anything. He could have done anything on his last night on earth. But Jesus decided to give his disciples actions that would bring people closer. He gave them actions that would heal. He gave them actions that would transform. He gave them actions that would embody unconditional love. He was teaching how to pray with your feet. Yeah. Here at NTCSL, we are dedicated to spirit-led social action in the world. We are here not only to consciously wake up the boulders in our own life, to move those boulders in our own life, but to help and support and move the boulders out of the way for others who need help with that heavy lift. If you feel called, I invite you to join us. You can check out our website. You can click on Spirit-Led Activism, and you will see all of the ways and opportunities that you have right here at NTCSL to take loving action to help move boulders for others. We take action to move boulders by supporting climate justice, common sense gun reform, equity for BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQIA rights, mental health and health care equity, our prison ministry, refugee and immigrant support, reproductive dignity and rights, and voting rights. We are here to help move boulders for others. That is a spiritual path. If you're interested, I'm going to be facilitating our next meeting. It's April 23rd, right after service, in person and online. Please join me, and we'll talk about how we can together move these boulders. I'll tell you what, there's a big boulder in Tennessee that needs to be moved. And there is a big boulder around bodily autonomy for women. And there is a big boulder around ageism and sizeism and ableism. There are big boulders that we get to help move. We get to wash the feet of those. So I invite you to join us in that. In the summer of 1994, lightning struck the steeple of the St. James Church in Richmond, Virginia. And this was a church that had been established way back in the 1700s. So it was a devastating fire. It burned the pews and the organ and the prayer books and the altar. And the very next Sunday was Baptism Sunday, which in this community was a very big deal for them. And do you know what these beautiful people did in Richmond, Virginia? They put up tents in the street, and they baptized babies while they stood in the ashes of their ruined church. And a sign maker in town donated a banner that has become that church's motto. And that banner was from Nehemiah 2:18, and it read, "Let us rise up and build." Let us rise up and build. It may feel like the church has burned and we're standing in the ashes of this country. I am inviting you on this Easter Sunday to lean into hope, to lean into strength, to move those boulders, because I am telling you, every single one of us incarnated here at this time to do this together. Are you with me? Yes. It being Easter and all, I've been thinking a lot about Jesus this week, and I can't help but thinking that he would have been the first person out there building those tents, and he would not have needed directions. The word Easter comes out of the ancient celebration of fertility and spring. The actual word means dawn. Just as the dawn ascends from dark to light, the promise of dawn, the promise of Easter teaches us that each day, every day, every morning, my loves, we are given the opportunity to move away the boulders in our lives and the boulders in others' lives. I invite you to think about that this week, to really lean into that. I want to complete this service today by sharing with you another, what has become tradition here. It is an Easter prayer that I actually wrote, and I wrote it in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And as I revisited it, I recognized that it still very, very much speaks to us now and the work that we are engaged in here. So I'm going to invite the practitioners to come down forward. I invite you to take a deep breath and turn within, closing your eyes, maybe gazing downward if that's more comfortable for you. May love give us the strength to rise, so that we raise our next generation with profound compassion. May we have a swift end to all disease. May we fiercely protect Mother Earth. May we deeply bow in reverence and celebration to people of all faiths, cultures, gender expressions, to our Black and brown siblings here and all over the world, to people of all abilities, sizes, brain differences, to our immigrant siblings and refugee heroes. May we ensure fair and safe elections and always protect the most vulnerable of our human family. May we proudly reclaim a country that acts from a place of integrity and kindness. May we all become peacemakers and peace builders. May we laugh a lot. Let us remake the world with audacious hope, with the audacious hope of Easter. May we awaken and stay woke. May we rise and stay risen. And may we do this in the name of love. And so it is. Amen. Happy Easter. I love you all so much.
Hi, friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that this message supported you. We are a nonprofit, and we do all of this based solely on the gifts that you give. No amount is too small or too large. You can text to give. You can go online and check out our website. We're doing so much. You can give that way. Thank you so much for being here, for being a part of this community, and for supporting this message of bringing more light, more love, and spirit-led social action out into the world. Thank you. You're loved. So loved.